This is a day that the Lord has made. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Vanessa. I'm a Christian woman doing my best to put God first. I am a mom and I wanted to share with you all the children's stories of the Bible from the Old and New Testaments. It was a book given to me the Christmas I was 9 years old. It introduced me to Jesus, to God, to all the stories of the Bible, which led me to want to read the real Bible. So I want to read every single chapter. It will be one chapter per video. If you want to read this with your children, feel free to do so. Enjoy. Chapter 17, Nehemiah. Ezra and his followers rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem, but the great wall that had once surrounded the city and protected the Israelites was still broken down. This was dangerous, as it was the time of frequent small wars and revolts against the rule of a great king in a distant city. The Israelites had been favored by the Persian ruler. He had ended their captivity, allowed them to return to their homes and rebuild the temple, and he had restored the treasures to the house of the Lord. Because they were loyal to the Persian king, the people in Jerusalem were often attacked, but they had no defense against the raids and plundering of their warring pagan neighbors because of the broken wall. Travelers from Judah brought word to the court of the Persian king, Artaxerxes, of the terrible distress of the defenseless people in Jerusalem. One of the highest-ranking officials of the royal court was Nehemiah, who had risen from the group of exiles to become the king cup-bearer. When Nehemiah heard of the suffering of his fellow Israelites in Jerusalem, he wept and prayed and mourned so greatly that the king asked him what the trouble was. He told the king that the city, the place of his father's tombs, lay in waste, and the gates were burned down. Nehemiah then asked the king to send him to Judah, to the city of Jerusalem, to rebuild it. Artaxerxes granted this request and gave him passports and letters of authority, which made him the royal governor. When Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem, he spent 3 days learning about the situation. Then, taking only a few men, he went out to inspect the broken walls at night. He did this secretly because he did not want his enemies to know about his plan to rebuild the fortifications, lest they attack while the defenses were weakened. When he knew what had to be done, he gathered the workers needed for the construction. Craftsmen and merchants from the city neighborhoods, farmers and workers from the nearby towns, even the priests from the temple, all came to join him in this great undertaking. At first, the enemies of the Israelites ridiculed Nehemiah and his men for attempting so great a task. But when they saw how the walls grew, they became very angry and plotted together to attack and stop the work. Nehemiah prayed to God and kept his men at work. In addition, each worker kept his weapons at his side, and those who were not at work guarded the others. This show of force discouraged the enemies, and so the workers finished the walls and the gates and the towers and all that was needed to make the city safe. When this great task was done, Nehemiah gathered all the people to join in a great procession: the priests, their assistants, the Levites, who sang and played the musical instruments, and the community leaders. All of them marched around the walls and past the great gates to give thanks and to dedicate the walls to God. Nehemiah, his assignment completed, returned to the court of King Artaxerxes. After staying there for a while, he went to Jerusalem again and found that things were not as good as when he had left. The people were not prosperous, and they had neglected to make their offerings to God at the temple. The priests had become careless, and a man named Tobiah had even moved his furniture into one of the temple's chambers. Nehemiah was very angry and made Tobiah move his possessions out of the holy place. Then he brought the people back to worship at the temple as the Lord had commanded. There was also reforms that had to be made. Many people were working, selling, and doing many other things on the Sabbath. Others were breaking God's laws by marrying idol worshippers. Nehemiah stopped all these sins so that the people of Israel might truly worship God and obey his laws. I will have a playlist, like I said, by chapter in Old Testament and then the New Testament if you want to continue reading. See you next time.